at the national centers. We are streaming right now. And today is our final talk with one of our greatest experts in North American culture in Argentina. This is my opinion. So this is Marcelo Burello. He's a teacher in the Universidad de Buenos Aires. And he's going to talk about film and literature of the United States. And yeah, okay. If you have any questions, you can leave your questions in our chat, okay? So, yes, I leave you with Marcelo Burello. Thank
you. Good afternoon to everyone here and over there. It's an honor and a duty for me to be here, since I studied both literature and cinema. In my country, it was a tradition to study both with a high quality and for free. So I keep this tradition lingers on no matter what. We proceed with the first slide. Thank you for having me. And since we're kind of short of time, my first slide. Okay, that's okay. So, I want to talk for a bit about the influence of literature and cinema, movies throughout the world. Of course, it's a too gigantic and broad topic to approach in half an hour, so I'll just bring you some highlights, and then maybe we can discuss later some crucial issues and some debatable points. But for the main part, I prepared kind of a guideline or timeline even, so we can maybe place some core highlights of American culture and eventually discuss if they are truly Native American achievements, I mean American in the modern sense, or maybe just appropriations of sorts. We'll just discuss it later, hopefully. So on my first slide, you can easily distinguish two, I think, very popular icons of American culture. My favorite, Edgar Allan Poe. That's an old portrait, mid-19th century. And if you are a movie fan, you can obviously see over there on the right, that's a still frame from High Noon, yeah, which has many different titles in Spanish and funny titles. But A la hora señalada, it was called in Argentina. But I chose both of them because one is, of course, literary and the other cinema. And Western has played an important so we can anticipate something kind of important, and that is the pace, the rhythm, if you will, the velocity of American fiction, and some kind of heroism, some notion of society which transpires mainly in Western movies, not as much in Western books, okay? So that was my first slide, kind of an introduction. So we move to the next. And my first issue here is that we're talking about cinema and literature. Of course, it's, as I already said, a broad topic. On top of that, cinema and literature both fall kind of short to what I try to the meaning I'm trying to convey here. I mean, cinema should include TV at the very least. I mean, we're all influenced by TV shows, TV series, and as we grow up, by cartoons, which are foundational for the children's imagination. And literature has come to be intertwined and intermingled with comic strips on newspapers, comic magazines, and nowadays we have these graphic novels. I take it for granted you are familiar with them now. So literature and cinema are both great concepts, huge concepts, but at the same time they fall short of what we can encompass by American fiction. So I'll be mainly talking about American fiction and not only or specifically cinema and literature. With that purpose in mind, I just picked up a Batman cover for a CD edition, which is a mixture of a comic magazine and then a TV series and then another format, a new media, the CD, which is going on kind of obsolescence now. Okay. Then we move on to the next slide. We'll be dealing for the next half an hour with not original American inventions. Therefore, I say almost original American inventions. Cinema was almost invented by Edison, but it were the Lumiere brothers who really thought not only the gadget, but also the show, what we consider all today cinema. And of course, TV, well, that's debatable. There's an American technician who claimed to have invented it, but it appears to be a Scotsman who invented it. And comic, it was a Swiss man, mid-19th century, who invented the comic. And animation, it's also debatable. I mean, it's not important who invented this media or these languages. What is important is that America made them popular, and through them, America got to get a grip on the worldview in a global scale. The concept global was forged by an American economist, by the way. So, and the illustration, of course, is Charlie Chaplin, who was a Londoner and who died in Switzerland. He married an American, though, Eugene O'Neill's daughter, but he couldn't have made it without the Hollywood system in the background, okay? So when we talk about TV, cinema, literature, magazines, maybe they are not properly all American inventions, but America took them up and inspired the world through them. That's what I wanted to show with this slide. We can proceed with the next one. That's me, by the way, when I was younger. And I won't dwell on this because it gets a little tricky, but I just wanted to point that for a nation to exist, you need to have some ideals, some values, some shared history, some imagination, some project of a future, and it takes a daily willpower from the citizens, the sense of belonging to a nation. Here I illustrated this with all sorts of American flags and banners. Some are very exotic, for instance, the yellow one, but never mind. American nation and American nationality implies a lot of willpower and imagination, as was demonstrated by many theologians on the subject. And a project of a nation, the will of a nation to be this American experiment, as it was called by the founding fathers, required a lot of narrative, a lot of imagination, a lot of templates and patterns and role models and ideal characters in order to integrate them all and forge a concept of nationality. So what I propose in my next slide, I think this is one of the main points I wanted to present to you today, is that there has been at least a wave, an important wave of myth making and narrative making in each century. Of course, properly speaking, America starts here with the founding fathers, but as we all know, it was kind of founded, equivocally founded in the 17th century by the Pilgrim Fathers, the so-called Puritans. And that's a main frame for American imagination and therefore for the world, because Puritans drew up always on biblical sources and they laid out the foundation for the entire American imagination throughout history. For instance, the Manichaeism, the polarization, the fight between good and evil, these heroic characters who are supposed to confront nature and society and even themselves, well, all that comes from this first wave who maybe didn't truly wanted to found a nation. It is not clear on the Mayflower Compact. If you read it, there's a will to create something new, but under the King of England and under God, of course, so we could discuss that. Important thing is that starting with the 18th century, with the founding fathers, the fiction, the American fiction proper, kind of starts first with a strong discussion about what is Americanness, what is to be an American. It's a question which surfaces through all texts and speeches and even sermons for a century. And then in the 19th century, the pioneer movement, the homesteaders, whatever you may call it, that's the fiction properly starting, the ideal of the man exploring what was called the frontier. Frontier is maybe the key concept to this moment. And there's this thesis by American historian Frederick Turner, who stated that the American character, the American way of being, really began in the woods, really began in the fight, with nature and with the so-called Indians, the American natives, and so on. Then in the 20th century, they came up with this melting pot concept, which implied a kind of a forced integration of social forces, different ethnicities, as you well know, and then the cinema and then TV tried to capture this and somehow do something with it, many times with, issues and problems. And we don't have time for the 21st century, but apparently new social and ecological awareness is coming up on the main topics and subjects of movies and books, but that's in 50 years or so we'll know if that is so. So the four main waves of myth and narrative making, we could call them the Pilgrim moment, the Founding Father moment, the Pioneer moment, and the Melting Pot moment, which of course was strongly appropriated by the movies at the very beginning. On my next slide, I show a very synthesized summing up of some main contributions made by American literature, where we can't talk yet of cinema. And American literature in this moment provides the world, especially Europe, I'm talking about the world, but in 19th century it was really only Europe, a new sense of nature, some new characters, heroes and heroines, who are ruled by self-determination, free of institutions and traditions. These men and women of the frontier are men of nature, are Adam and Eve reborn. And there you see the Puritans lurking behind this kind of characters, okay? And of course, new styles, formats, and genres. With a fast-paced prose, there comes the adventure and detective fiction. There we have Edgar Allan Poe as a foundational figure, new sorts of cultural distribution like cheap magazines, the dime novels, and so on. And I strongly emphasize the George story. It wasn't called that way by then. It was tale or prose tale, but this is no American invention either. It was an English invention, if you will. It came from Italian Renaissance, but the short story as was shaped by Washington Irving and Edgar Allan Poe and Nathaniel Hawthorne and Herman Melville, it was a new kind of product, a new kind of literary genre, and then it took flight from America into the world. So just a picture of that, and then we have in the next slides this new antagonists, for instance, new forces of nature, elementary, brutal nature, surfaces or resurfaces with American fiction in the 19th century. Europe had forgotten about this problem, I dare say. And then, by the end of the 19th century, we have a new kind of art villain, that is corporate business. Please don't confound the octopus with the whale, because this is an actual whale. It was, of course, Moby Dick, but the octopus is the railroad company trying to, appropriate everything as it goes into California. So it's the Frank Norris book is a classic about these new ways of American corporate business and the evil that lurks behind them. This is a new notion because Europe wasn't aware of this kind of issue, okay? And then some new characters. First of all, and mainly, the new Adam, the man of nature. That is a Soviet stamp, a postal stamp collection, by the way, by the end of 20th century, which shows Natty Bumppo and the last of the Mohicans and so on, to prove the impact, I mean. And this is the original cover of the most popular of the 5 novels, where James Fenimore Cooper created this universal, this really archetypal figure, which is Natty Bumppo. He was Anglo-Saxon, he was American, but he had been bred and he had mingled with local natives as a child. So he was kind of a mixture between the European man, the white man, and the so-called, pardon me, Indian, that is, I guess, Chingachgook, his best friend, the last of the Mohicans, right? So this sometimes enmity and sometimes friendship between white man and Native American, sometimes the fight between Indians and Caucasian explorers and invaders, really impacted the whole world. And by mid-19th century, many novelists were taking up inspiration in this kind of man, the man of nature, the adventurer, the new man, the reborn man, the new child who dared face every single risk and who was a nobleman, who had, this blend of civilization and wilderness in his blood. That was some new creation, and that is properly American. The next one is also an American invention, and it's the detective, the so-called detective. It wasn't called detective by then. Auguste Dupin, Le Chevalier, created by Edgar Allan Poe. That is the man of ratiocination, as Poe said. A new hero downtown, a new hero in the city where there were new threats and new problems. That is Sherlock Holmes, by the way, who is a direct descendant from Auguste Dupin. And this lineage of detectives really got under our skin as a myth, as a new figure, because there were new crimes, new scenes of violence. Police couldn't solve them out, and then Poe came with this idea. And a special man, a very smart, intelligent man, could do the police work without the police work. That is called detective fiction. In Spanish, there's this irony. We call this relato policial or novela policial, as if the police were truly important. The police is never there. The police never gets to solve the problem. Okay, and on the next slide, maybe most important today because of the social issues that are being raised in society, the heroine, the woman, the strong, emancipated woman, as a new kind of hero. That is also a contribution, an American contribution. Yeah, in the Scarlet Letter by Hawthorne, you have Hester Prynne, who is a dissident, who is a rebel, who is a lover, who is a mother, who is a victim. And I just accompanied this by I think the original movie poster. By then, Lillian Gish was the main star back then, and it was maybe, I think, the first movie version of this novel, which is a classic. I don't know, maybe you have seen another one. There are many iterations and versions of this classic novel, but what's important is that a woman appears as the hero for the very first time, and that is through American fiction. And in my next slide, we can go deeper into this to assert that there were many strong female characters, yes, but there were also many emancipated female writers in America, and that's a novelty. In France, in England, in Germany, female writers were just few. They usually had to change their name to remain hidden. You all know that, of course. And but this was not the situation in America. So I tried to illustrate this novelty, as it were, with 3 images. The original book cover of Uncle Tom's Cabin, America's greatest bestseller in 19th century, and that was the first and only time that in a major Western country, a book written by a woman was the bestseller of the century. And then you have Edith Wharton, Louisa May Alcott, Little Women, yeah, Age of Innocence. They were properly emancipated female writers. They were thinkers, some of them inspired by transcendentalism, most of them, I dare say. But in the end, this is really something new. Women are producing culture and not only consuming culture. And that's a total change. That's a huge change in Western culture. The woman, not only as a heroine portrayed by a man, as in the Scarlet Letter by Hawthorne, but also the woman writing, and not only for women, but for the audiences in general. Okay? So, we move on. Then we have cinema and TV, and I just try to sum up some very few of the major American contributions, which are so many. First of all, and mainly, we should think about the language in itself, the camera, the shooting, the film editing as a technique, as a new way to convey meaning, to tell stories, to impact and influence audiences in America first and then throughout the world. So the movies, the talkies then were really a clash, were really a hit, were really something to talk about for the, at least for the first decades of the century. And then there came new story arcs, new genres, the Western, the thriller, the disaster movie, the sitcom, and so on. New topics, new characters. We're gonna discuss them for a bit with the next slides. So, don't cancel me, but these were the blockbusters at the very beginning, and I say don't cancel me because they both defended the so-called lost cause or great cause of the South. They were pro-secessionist, pro-rebellious, so they were pro-Southern ideology. But in spite of that, which is no minor issue, Griffith kind of invented the language of cinema. That's David Wark Griffith, an American playwright and actor who had failed in many different ways, in many different jobs. But then he found Hollywood, he got to Hollywood, and then he made it his home, and he created this new sensation, the blockbuster, which in Argentina, I guess we call it always superproducción, right? And it proved that if you invest money in a movie, you can earn lots of more money a year later, or maybe a couple of years later. This one, I guess you have watched it, or maybe surely you know it. I don't know if you watched this, but this is Lo que el viento se llevó, Gone with the Wind. And this is also, with some subtlety, not very subtle, a defense of the Southern cause, but a love story in the essence, okay? These were huge movies which made a broad impact through the world, and there's a problem there. They came with an ideology behind. Not many people were prepared or were ready to see that or to perceive that. It took many years of discussion to notice that behind this blockbuster, they were telling us the story of the birth of the Ku Klux Klan and defending some kind of values which were, I don't know, hideous, to say the least. And there's the risk with the audiovisual language. You are not always conscious of what you are consuming, and maybe then you can repeat or promote some values that were really not meant to be your own, okay? With my next slide, there came the musicals, the first musical, which was also polemical because Al Johnson had to do a blackwashing. I don't know, I took up West Side Story, I don't know why, but it's, of course, Shakespeare retold through a musical. And then the sitcom as a new format. This, by the way, was the real first television hit worldwide. Almost every nation in the world in the 50s and the 60s got to watch this show, black and white, low definition, maybe reruns of the same episodes, maybe. But I Love Lucy was really the first hit, yes? And it created a sort of tradition. Well, that's my favorite, but maybe you could, I don't know, take Friends or something like that. And the sitcom created characters, role models, a way of living which inspired many people, many local cultures who had simply nothing to do with this way of life. But then you got to see people very, very far remote from New York or Los Angeles, I don't know, trying to drink a coffee every day or having fun with a loony neighbor or something like that, because they are always present in sitcoms. Sitcoms are kind of a matrix, are kind of a background for our culture, and they got to be really unconscious in our lives because we love them and we tend to repeat even, I don't know, their catchphrases or their gestures are under our skin, as it were. So again, there's a risk there of unconscious assimilating something which is foreign and maybe inadequate in some sort of way, but at the same time, we all love them, and we couldn't live without them today. Next, thank you. Cartoons, as I already and my favorite again, Pink Panther, and of course, give them out, The Simpsons, but show me you have a favorite, please, maybe. But cartoons shaped children's imagination throughout the world, and they are very unconscious, very subliminal, I dare say, in the way they transpire some values, some things of American culture really got to be global and international, and maybe it's open for debate to what extent we should lead our children to watch them so freely and so easy. Sometimes, I don't know, at least when our children are teenagers, we should discuss this kind of assimilation, but okay. We move on. You're experiencing technical difficulties?
Yes, sorry.
A TV show would say.
Show must go on. Oh my God.
We don't have commercials, which would be really valuable and expensive, yeah. So, in the meantime, you can think of a favorite sitcom, favorite cartoon, think about the influence it has had on your daily life. Yeah. Next one. Okay. With cinema, there came, of course, also new antagonists, violent or also violent but more subtle, the psychopath, the gangster. We couldn't live without them now because we're always afraid of what's in the city, what's going on there by night especially. And these new kind of figures were not really invented properly by American cinema, but they were projected into the worldwide imagination to a scale which was unthinkable yet. That is the first Scarface, so don't look for Al Pacino. Next slide. Polarization came with cinema because it's a result, as I already said, of Puritan imagination, and then you have super nice, cool guys and some girls, which are of course the superheroes. That was the first Superman comic ever. And then we have also, as a product of this polarization, which is of course a simplicity, new arch villains, and some of them got to be more charismatic and than the heroes they confront. For instance, our beloved Joker, right? Then, American cinema was also a vehicle for American self-praise, legitimation, I dare say, and American self-criticism, sometimes very harsh. Yes, you see a Western and a war movie, which are perfect instances of both polar positions. America, the great, the American experiment, working on, moving on, pushing forward, and American eating itself, American totally deluded, right? Next slide. Some ambiguities, some ambiguous characters. The final polemical scene of Casablanca, where a strong male, macho male type, Humphrey, goes hand in hand with his new police officer friend, resigning the woman. And then a couple of films which show us some ambiguous positions, some ambivalent values of our culture. A father, a grandfather, a family man who organizes a criminal action against the enemies to introduce booze and weapons and then drugs into the country. But he's a nice man, he's a noble, honorable man. He's Marlon Brando, right? Okay, and then sometimes there are synergies between American cinema and American literature. This is another archetypal figure important in American fiction, the youth as the moment in which a man and a woman find themselves. So this 50s, 60s emancipation of youth culture brought, for example, the famous novel by Salinger, Catcher the Rye, and at the same time Rebel Without a Cause, which is, by the way, an excellent way to define a teenager. Okay, and then sometimes these synergies work both ways in the sense that this is an adaptation. So literature and cinema are showing us at the very same time kind of the same story, because the film is an adaptation of the novel. This is also a female writer, by the way. And then, in conclusion, are these, some of which I just showed you, are these American original themes, really? Not sure. The American Dream, this famous concept, which is portrayed, for instance, in Citizen Kane and so many other movies. Rocky maybe is the most emblematic of all, the iconic. Well, the dream of, the ambition of personal success, of social promotion, and so on. It's just a bourgeois idea, an European 18th century idea, which really America or the United States took up, and they empowered it, they made it stronger, they made it more popular, but it was not really an original obsession. It's only an emphasis, if you will. And then the hero's journey, the idea, the cult of heroes, so to speak, which is depicted typically in this saga of movies, this series of movies, because the advisor to these stories was none other than the American anthropologist Joseph Campbell, who took up his ideas from Jung and Mircea Eliade. So this is a very non-historical position where archetypal thinking proposes or suggests that we all have a limited imagination of figures and characters. So American cinema, most of all, took them up just to present us in a new iteration, but in the background, it is very easy to recognize some types, some archetypes, yes? And George Lucas wrote the screenplay for the first movies. Then there are too many, I know, but the first movies were written as an inspiration from Joseph Campbell. And as I say, there are archetypes at action here which really deny the Americanness of this so American product, okay? So the idea, the concept of hero's journey, and this is strong hero who has to confront, of course, his father, who has associates, and there's always a beautiful woman involved there, and so on and so forth. Well, this is not American, and the quest of the American dream, absurd as it seems, might not even be American. So what I wanted to point at this moment is that we tend to credit or blame American fiction coming through in writing maybe, or coming in audiovisually, consciously or unconsciously, I don't know. We tend to credit or blame American culture for our types and for our role models and for our narrative arcs. Many of them are not really American, and many of them have a negative side, have a B face, so to speak, and which is not that popular, but it could be more popular, of course. So it's impossible to encompass and to approach this subject. What I try to present to you here is that we couldn't be who we are today without American fiction, broadly speaking, yes, literature and cinema. So let's hope for a better fiction with some new characters, some new types, some new values in the future. So my last slide, I think. That's a wrap. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Marcelo. Thank you to the binational centers that are watching us. Oh, I see that we are a lot more, right? Okay, good.
Yeah.
So yeah, now we are going to start the debate with Marcelo. Good to see you guys, and good to see everyone through the screen and binational centers, and have a great US week, okay? Bye-bye.